This Wednesday, we got to run through that brick wall. Big game breakdown. A reminder that on Tuesdays with our show on CBS Sports Network, which you can watch on YouTube or download wherever you get your podcasts, we take a look at some of the biggest games in the Big Ten. That included this week a look at the big time game on CBS with Wisconsin going to play USC, as well as the Fighting Illini of Illinois going to see if they can do 9 overtimes again against Penn State. So Penn State, Illinois, and USC, Wisconsin, big game breakdowns. You can find that on Tuesday's show, wherever you get your podcast, which now brings us to the nation at large in a game of medium significance between number 2 Georgia and number 4 Alabama. We've been looking at this one on the schedule ever since the SEC schedule was first announced. What an incredible table setter for two teams that want to be in the SEC championship race, in the college football playoff race, and contending for national championships. Clearly, as top 4 teams at this point in the season, they are already have done enough to get there. So let's go inside that matchup. Tom, where do you want to start with this one?
How healthy is Georgia? Like Tate Ratledge.
Williams.
Yeah, we know Tate Ratledge is out. Michael Williams is banged up. There's some talk, I think Kirby was saying yesterday in his media availability, that, you know, they got to see how it looks in practice this week before they can figure out if he's going to be playing in this game. Right now, from what we have seen, I have more confidence in Alabama than I do Georgia as far as being a good football team, which is not something I expected to be saying at this point at the start of the year. I just think that Georgia's game against Kentucky, we talked about it. Yes, there have been games in the past where Georgia kind of sleptwalked against opponents in the first half of games. Then they got things together, and then they turned on the death machine and just slowly suffocated them in the second half. That didn't happen against Kentucky. They struggled the entire game. They just ended up winning in the end because they were the better football team. So I don't know what this Georgia team truly is as far as facing good opponents. I mean, they crushed Clemson, but you know, we're still somewhat skeptical on Clemson, and I just think Clemson does not have the dudes to really compete with them. And that game was also, let's not forget, close for a while. And as I said at the time, it certainly kind of felt like the Clemson defense just kind of relented when they realized that there was no chance that their offense was going to be able to do anything in that game. Then it snowballed from there. Whereas Alabama, I mean, Jalen Milroe is still, when it comes to being a passer, is still limited, but I do think he is getting better under Kalen DeBoer, which is not really a shock to anybody who's paid attention to Kalen DeBoer throughout his career. His quarterbacks tend to improve. He seems to know what he's doing, both with what he's doing on offense and how he develops them. And I just look at this team like the run game is solid. It's good. Jalen Milroe plays a big part of that. And I also think the passing game is still, like last year, very much deep shots or nothing. But they've been really effective at it. So how will they be able to do that against this Georgia team? I had questions last year in the SEC championship. We saw how that went. And I just think if you look at the situation in recent years, Alabama seems to have something on Georgia. Like, they've been the one team that gives Georgia problems. So it's a really tough test for me. I think it's a huge game. I think we're going to learn a whole hell of a lot about both of these teams. I've been impressed with Alabama's offensive line even before Proctor came back. I mean, they weren't great, but I do think that some of the other guys on there have improved. And since Proctor's been back, I think in that game against Wisconsin, they looked very good. How will they look against Georgia's front seven? Been somewhat lackluster to me watching the Bulldogs up front, but again, that's partially because Michael Williams hasn't been out there. So if he comes back, does that unit look better? Do they still struggle if he's not? For the number 2 and the number 4 team, and I guess I'm just kind of talking in a circle here, I feel like Alabama at number 4 is the team I have a better idea of. Like, for Georgia to be number 2, I have a whole hell of a lot of questions about a team that's ranked that high that you probably should at this point in the season.
You know what Georgia has, or you know what Bama has on Georgia? Equal talent. Like, Georgia almost an advantage almost every game they play. Not this one. And that's where I think it comes interesting. Like, that's a game where they are pretty evenly matched. They have a lot of 4 and 5 stars, a lot of NFL talent. That's where I think this thing gets really interesting. I think it is one of those things too where it's easy to forget what they did against Clemson because they did dominate them. And Clemson, as I was saying before, like I'm buying Clemson, I think they've looked better. And maybe the thing that they've looked better is because they don't have to play against Georgia's defense. And they did play them pretty well for a half. I never thought I would say this in this game specifically. I kind of feel better about Alabama's quarterback than Georgia's.
Like
Not
coming
from an
into the year.
NFL perspective, just in this game, where it is, what he's working with, the way he's played so far this year, what he brings to the table. Like if you were doing quarterback edge, I'd give it to Bama.
Is Bama's offensive coaching advantage over Georgia greater than Georgia's defensive coaching edge over Alabama?
I think it's pretty fair. I think the bigger mismatch here is Georgia's offense against Alabama's defense.
Because like, I don't think Mike Bobo is a bad OC, but I certainly don't regard him as like some sort of amazing OC, right? Like he's not a wizard who would find a way to score points regardless of talent or situation. But I do kind of regard Kalen DeBoer as that. I think, I mean, DeBoer offensively is kind of I'll beat you with mine, or if you want to swap players, I'll beat you with yours. We'll still score points regardless of situation. I mean, within limits, of course. I think the interesting thing here is who can hit the deep shots better. The speed that Georgia and also Alabama have at the linebacker position is not normal. These teams have absolute like freaks at the linebacker spot, and they close ground really well underneath. And last year, Milroe running around was a problem for Georgia, and Bama pushed them around pretty well. Bama was really big up front. We know Georgia was kind of injured coming into the game. And Georgia, like the way they played that game, like they just tried to spy Milroe like crazy. But that didn't work real well. I anticipate Georgia will try to light him up and see if he can hit some of these deep shots, which he has done a nice job of doing this year. But I don't think the way they played it last year is the right way to play it. And I would not sit back. I would send it if I'm Georgia. I think Brinson and Mykel Williams will play. This is not reporting. It's just my best read on the situation based on people I talk to. I'm not sure on Hall. I'm not sure on the offensive side on Ratledge. But I think whoever hits more deep balls here is probably going to win the game. It's a higher variance approach for both. I mean, let's recall, like, Bama fans don't like when we say this. We've been very complimentary of a lot of aspects of their team this year. But Bama's defense has allowed open guys against Western Kentucky, and Western Kentucky was starting the wrong kid, and they got – I mean, it's unfortunate TJ Finley got hurt, but he's not as good of a player as Veltkamp, who played really well over the weekend and beat Toledo. Okay? He never saw the open guys. Brown for USF, they had plenty of open guys. He saw him. He just whiffed on the throws. Like, he just had trouble hitting deep shots this year. He missed him against Miami. He also missed him against Southern Miss, the USF kid. Wisconsin had their quarterback knocked out of the game in the first quarter. Alabama has not faced anyone remotely competent at throwing the deep ball at all this year, but they have had guys loose running through that secondary a good bit. If that trend continues, Carson Beck will hit them. I'm
who's
pretty
he
sure.
hit
Even
them
though I don't
to?
think Georgia's receivers are awesome. Like, they're
Well,
still better than Bama's DBs, I think.
Because that is one of the things to me, like Tate Ratledge, the injury sucks because he's really good. But I do feel like as a whole, Georgia's offensive line has been far better on the interior. I don't think their tackles have played well at all. I think they're very much missing Amarius Mims. I don't think in pass pro the tackles have done a good job. I don't think receiver-wise that there's anybody on this team that truly scares me. Like Dominic Lovett's been good, but at the receiver position, Dylan Bell to me has, he was banged up in that Clemson game. He's been somewhat disappointing. Oscar Delvis really let me down overall. But I mean, like Colby Young comes in from Miami. Is he even been a factor for this for the offense so far this year? So I look at that matchup of Alabama's pass rush against those tackles, and it's like I feel like Carson Beck is going to have to be incredible in this game for Georgia to win. Like, I don't think that either one of these teams is capable of blowing the other out. But to your point, like if it's going to be like a deep ball battle right now, even though I think Carson Beck is the better passer of the football, I think Jalen Milroe is in the better situation to hit those deep balls than Carson Beck is.
I think if
They're
we're
going
just,
to run the hell out of Jalen Murray. Like we said it's on the show all offseason. Kalen DeBoer is not this, hey, I have to develop you in an NFL style coach. He's just trying to win ball games and score points. And if that means you have Michael Penix, who's got 2 bad knees and you drop back all the time, cool. But you know what? 3 times in the last decade, a Kalen DeBoer quarterback has either rushed for 1,000 yards or has been the leading rusher on his team. If he needs to run Jalen Milroe into the ground this game, guess what? They got ice baths. They got cryo chambers. They're fine. I think you run the hell out of Jalen Milroe if you're Alabama and you take your deep shots. But I do think a blowout is possible on both sides due to the potential high variance nature of the approach that I think needs to be employed by both teams.
I think Ryan Williams is the best wide receiver in this game.
I think there's an argument for it.
Like,
yeah.
Because you were talking, you list through, because look, we've dealt with Georgia. We put them under a microscope every single season. That's just where Georgia is in modern college football. You can imagine Arian Smith having that big game, right? Or even if that big game is only 3 catches, but it's like a couple of them are huge long balls, or Dylan Bell, the Swiss Army knife, comes up with some big plays in a big moment. You mentioned Colby Young's been a little bit banged up. I mean, it is disappointing for Georgia that reportedly London Humphrey's got the kissing disease.
Uh-oh.
Mono.
It comes back to bite you.
Athens is fun. Reportedly dealing with some mono, not going to play in the game. That's not good, because we know that he can be that other nice, other piece of the passing attack that they've got right there. But, roll through all those Georgia wide receivers. You could see any one of them, being a superstar. Go through Alabama's wide receiver room. You could see Jeremy Bernard having a good game. You could see Kendrick Law having a good game. But the one that scares me out of both of these wide receiver rooms is Ryan Williams, just so special. And you talk about a deep ball. They get the one look that they want, and Williams just burns the guy off the line, and you let Milroe do what Milroe does best in the passing game and just chuck it. Just chuck it up there, dog. Like that's there. That's going to be there for Alabama. I kind of think there's going to be a lot of points in this game.
Depending on the weather, obviously. Like there's been a lot of games this week that groups have bet under early in the week, just due to the anticipated effects of the storm as it makes its way up the Southeast and into the Midwest. I am curious. We think Alabama's offensive line is good, and they have played pretty well. But let's also remember what we thought about Wisconsin's defensive line over the summer. I mean, both publicly and privately, we're like, man, these guys might really suck. And so far, they've played like it. Like Western Michigan moved the ball. Alabama moved it easily. USF blitzes like crazy, so it's not like they've faced a whole lot of 4-man pressure. We don't really know how this Alabama offense will operate if Georgia's able to get home with 4. Meanwhile, Georgia has faced like 2 very legitimate pass rushes. Kentucky has multiple NFL defensive linemen, and Clemson does as well. So, yes, I don't feel as good about Georgia's offensive line now as they did in the preseason. But to me, Alabama's offensive line this season is very untested. They have not seen any comparable bodies, whereas I have a decent sample set that Georgia has. Just the results have been rather mixed.
You know what Alabama does have? And I've called plenty of these guys out when they're not good at it, so I have to call them out when they are very good at it. They have Justice Haynes, who, when it comes to picking up a blitz, I mean, the kid's a good running back, but when it comes to picking up blitzes, he's very, very, very good, and he's very eager. And I just want him to know I see that when I watch the tape, and I appreciate it.
No, I totally agree.
I still think Georgia misses Bowers and McConkey, and specifically Carson Beck. Like, he really hasn't found that go-to guy yet. And that's something maybe it emerges in this game or he finds it, but they just still feels like they're lacking a little bit of an identity of the go-to guy in the critical situation. They're going to need somebody to emerge in this game.
All right, vibes. This game's going to be like too much to handle, right? I mean, this is one of those games where it is a huge fork in the road between like, would you want to be there or would you absolutely not want to be there? Like, there's too much emotion. There's just like way too much going on with Kirby coming to Tuscaloosa in the first season of no Nick Saban. Like, all of our haven't been underdogs since then, haven't done this, like all of it traces back to like 2007. And this Kalen DeBoer, has, to your point, man, like he does have that NAIA approach. Get whatever. All right, who's playing? All right, let's pick teams. Like, let's just go out there and play football. I'm a good coach. We can go coach ball. But like he is a human as well. And the pressure right now is it seems immense. So I'm interested if Alabama comes out and can play loose, then I think that's a great thing. If Alabama gets off to a slow start or plays tight, I might be looking at a little home field disadvantage type situation right there, where being the one who's coming in. I mean, how many times, Danny, how many times the players told us, oh, we've got Danny right here. When like you thrive off shutting them up, right? Oh, like the huge stadiums when you're coming in and you're like, man, that now I'm like more pumped up.
The best feeling in the world.
Yeah.
It's the coolest thing. I mean, I love playing at home, but I love playing on the road too because of that challenge and that type of electricity and being able to silence it.